Hi, I'm Lois Schonberger. I am a partner in our DC office. I've been at McKinsey for the last 6 or 7 years working in and around product and design topics, helping to kind of help organizations put product and design in the strategic driver's seat for growth and operational improvements. And I've been working as a product leader, product manager in early stage tech companies for about 12 years before I came here. So I'm super excited to be here with Sara talking about one of my favorite topics, which is the potential for design and product to drive inclusivity to the table in terms of strategic value in organizations. Sara, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Lois, and so great to be here to talk to you about this topic that is very important to me, and I'm very passionate about it. My name is Sara Cinnamon. I'm an expert from the design practice here at McKinsey based in San Francisco. Mechanical engineer by training, so I work to combine the systems thinking with design thinking to tackle really difficult problems. And I think inclusivity is one of those challenging problems that we face in the world. And what I like to do is help our clients get past the why and into the how. How can we make more inclusive products, services, experiences, and use that as a differentiating factor? And I really want to start by asking, like, what is your perspective on inclusive design? How have you experienced in the world, and why is it important to you?
Something that I've kind of experienced in the last couple of years is this increasing kind of merger between my professional work and my personal life, and like a sort of personal importance around making those things holistic together. As a woman in technology, as a gay woman in technology, like thinking about the sort of subtleties of who is and is not invited into certain experiences, and who is and is not not just able to access those things, but actually sort of enriched by digital interactions, is something that I'm really passionate about. The conversation around inclusivity has just become so much more, I think, like dynamic and multifaceted. Like I just hear the conversation coming up outside of conversations with the CHRO or a chief diversity officer.
What are some concrete actions that you've been able to see that really push that conversation forward in the development process, even if we're talking about products, spaces, experience, as well as the teams that are creating those?
I found to be a really kind of exciting, engaging way to think about this topic is, instead of saying, hey, you kind of have two chances to get it right on inclusion. The first day that you decide what you're going to build, and then when you take that thing to market and market it, we're kind of breaking down those bookends and saying, actually, like, inclusion should be a practice that's embedded into your everyday work the same way that test-driven development is embedded into the way that engineers think about their work now. That ownership mindset, that agency mindset, is a real shift in how we're talking about it. So instead of saying, well, when you decide what audience you're serving and what price point you're entering the market into, that's your moment of inclusion, that's actually a failure mode. Instead, we're working with people that are thinking about, well, how do I get my entire team to be thinking about this as a growth strategy, as a business driver, every time I make a choice in a conversation? How do I think about inclusion debt the same way I do technical debt? Not as something that we can't do now, but as something that we plan to address over time. It's not a single person's responsibility. It's a practice that's adopted across the group. And so, modern engineering practices, agile, the idea of, like, no matter who you are on a team, you can have an impact on the thing. And in fact, you have a responsibility to have an impact on the thing. It's less about some altruistic objective you're going for and more about, like, a common core practice.
A lot of folks that I've been talking to are really starting to get the why of being more inclusive, the why of being more accessible, but they still kind of get broken down by the how. And so when you're talking about this, these are really cool actions that people can embed, but what are some of the roadblocks to making those changes? What are you hearing about some of the challenges that people face?
So just really getting smarter about how we think about value, I think, is an important upstream thing. And then kind of baking it into the quality, the same way you think about performance and quality, you should be thinking about inclusion, and in particular thinking about bias, which I think is a very important thing in technology. So inclusion is one thing, accessibility is one thing, bias is another, right? That's not an exclusionary action, but an unintended consequence in the people that are included in your product. So really training your people on what that stuff means, not just your marketing people or your product people or your designers. So they have to be the flag bearers of, everybody's interest, but teaching your technologist, and in particular your product managers. I think product managers and product owners are sort of an underactivated resource around this challenge, but they're the people holding the requirements and the prioritization and the capacity planning and the value proposition of a product. So I think really getting into those conversations, building the skills in those people to sort of activate them around this as a driver of value is a super important step that people kind of overlook. Another big thing that we've talked about when we have conversations about the value of this is there's also like this very flat view of accessibility, like people who are, physically impaired need accommodations in hardware to be able to use it with their hands, things like this, like these very flat kind of linear demographics. People that are visually impaired need ABC in a digital interface to be able to like understand it. When in fact, that really limits the population impact when you think about the reach or potential customer base. But when you think about all the people in a given year that move in and out of those conditions, the amputee population that a healthcare organization is serving is fixed and somewhat predictable. But the number of people in a given year who have lost the use of an arm temporarily, who are holding a baby, who are experiencing carpal tunnel, who have had an accident, that population is massive. And so when you're doing the math about what does it mean to make something accessible, we have these really oversimplified ways of thinking about it. Like the model's not good enough.
Agreed. Yeah, it's almost like you have to kind of cross-cut your business KPIs with inclusive KPIs. Are we serving our customers well? Yes. Are we serving our customers in different geographies well? Maybe, maybe not.
Right.
What can we do as designers to make the products more accessible themselves? Release some of that tension. I think there's a couple of examples of how that kind of thinking can drive innovation.
Yeah.
For instance, text messaging. The voice agents that we know and love like Siri and Alexa, those were all designed for people with disabilities in the original. But as we see, widespread adoption. Different folks in different situations or temporary places actually value these kinds of interfaces as well. So I think it's really important to kind of bring that forth as a source of innovation as well.
What I've seen increasingly in the last 5 years has been designed as a process to drive better outcomes across the product development lifecycle. So design as a way of continuing to solve that problem and getting really integrated into the work cycle. I think the thing that's coming next that I'm excited about and I'm hearing more about is design for growth, like design for innovation. But in this conversation about inclusion, thinking about inclusivity as a strategic enabler is a real shift. Not like, hey, this is a commitment we've made and we're gonna march in the parades and we're gonna celebrate the right holidays. That's good, that's culture though. But for inclusion to be a strategic driver, you need to think of it the same way that organizations are thinking about resiliency right now. Like we don't know what's gonna change about the world, but we know that everything will change. So how do we build organizations and processes and that can take new input and consume new voices and in the course of a single decade serve Gen X and Gen Z who have very different kind of consumption modes. And that's resiliency, and that innovation is about inclusion. It's about building the muscle to be able to include new, different voices that are changing, not just represent them, in our billboards. Really build the muscle in the organization to be able to bring this new information in as an innovation driver and a strategic driver. When you start to shift to thinking that way, you're changing a lot of things about your organization, by the way. You're moving to a more product-centric organization, away from project-oriented. You've got dedicated teams that are allowed to wiggle in this way, without disrupting the whole house of cards. It's a practice. It's a resiliency practice in our organization. I think that is an exciting next stage. And that resiliency is not just about financial surviving. It's about climate change and global migration and language pattern shifts in different areas. Like resiliency for a digital product in Europe is being able to absorb 10,000 refugees into your country as a government agency in a month from the Ukraine and adjust all of your language, packages across your entire front customs interface to accommodate Ukrainian. Like, that's resiliency that is also inclusive. And so that starts to get really exciting.
I really love that point about wedding inclusion and resiliency, and I think it is going to be really important because, again, like you said, it builds in that flexibility, it builds in that adaptability to change. When you understand the root causes, when you understand the basic needs of your users, and you build your architecture or your feature set in a way that can flex and can adjust. And I think that it does end up being can end up being a differentiator as well in the experience. It's a way to kind of use that empathy as your competitive edge in a lot of ways, and then putting it into the structure, into the frameworks that you need to be able to help it adapt and move forward very quickly.
Yeah. To truly build sort of the resiliency, the appetite for change into an organization, you got to think about a few things. You have to organize your people in a way that they are rallied around the work that you're doing, not the projects that you're funding. So, like, what are the things you're building for the world? What's the work of your organization? So that can be product centric, it can be journey centric, but really align your org, physical butts in seats and teams, to the work that you want to put out into the world. Like, ship your organization, as people say, ship your org. I think the second thing is change. I've seen so many organizations that say they're doing agile but still do capacity planning as like, it's going to take us X number of days to solve a problem, now go do that in an agile way. I think that one of the biggest, simplest things that people should do is assume change and plan for it. Build capacity into your timelines for new ideas, or new information or change in the environment. Build it. It's always a race to release. Use that data. Get smarter. Get empowered with the tools that you already have. Like, there's no excuse for a consumer-facing organization with any kind of digital footprint right now to not have analytics about how people are using their products. So that's a lot of the stuff that we're kind of talking to people about these days, at least.
In a retail environment, if the inside is the most accessible place, most inclusive place, if your front door isn't accessible, then it doesn't matter. Right. So where in your strategy is that front door? How do you break into the process, and how do you really embed this change holistically throughout the process and your journeys?
Yeah, I am, less storied and experienced than you in a lot of this stuff, but have been building products for 20 years. And I think it's what I get excited about when this conversation comes up now is that inclusivity used to be something I was invited to be on a committee to think about, please come represent group ABC and make sure that we're hearing your voice. And then you'd be in the room for an hour and then you'd leave, and you would hope that somebody cared about what you said. What I'm seeing here at McKinsey, and what I'm seeing in conversations with the wonderful people that I get a chance to work with, like you, and with our clients, is a slow but accelerating realization that inclusivity is not it's not a website commitment. It's not like the poster hanging on the wall. It is actually a strategic value driver in your organization. It is a key to resiliency. It is a huge unlock to true culture, not just T-shirts and ping pong table culture, but real corporate loyalty, real enterprise loyalty and engagement. And that's exciting. We're at the beginning of really defining, what does this mean? How do we talk about this as a business strategy the same way we do regulatory excellence or consumer marketing? How does inclusivity get at the table for that?
Yep, exactly, 100%.
Yeah, it's super cool.
I think it's that excitement and that feeling of a step change, that we are at this tipping point. Many people have been doing the hard work for years to really lay the groundwork, and I feel like it's gotten to just enough dissemination and awareness, and that people are among the user groups or communities are being yes, this is progress, this is finally, and so it's getting in that amplification process. The people who did the hard work in the beginning, they're resonating. There's getting a harmonic frequency, basically, where it is getting into that point where change actually feels possible. We've got some of the tools from the technology side of things. We've got the willingness and the behaviors coming together. And we are finally starting to kind of get that business case of inclusion coming together as well.
There's like a literacy unlock, I feel like almost, like a language unlock that we're right on the edge of. The capacity to sit in a room of senior leaders in an organization and have a conversation about inclusivity as a strategic driver of growth, or inclusivity as like a cultural benchmark.
Thank you for having this conversation with me, and for everybody who's been listening in, thank you as well. Again, this is a continuing conversation. This is evolving. This is a process, and so open to continuing the conversation offline as well. If you have any questions, reach out to either Lois or myself. We'll be able to have this conversation with you as well. We're super excited for it. Thank you.